On February 15th, 399 BC, we find ourselves in Athens, once the most powerful Greek city-state. But now, 5 years after its defeat in the Peloponnesian War against Sparta, still struggling to recover. Nothing is as it once was during the height of Athenian democracy, and this day will prove it once again. Standing before the court is the 70-year-old philosopher Socrates, a man who for many years had been an unmistakable presence in the public life of Athens. He became known to the entire city not only for his revolutionary ideas, but also for his unconventional way of life. Now, this thinker is on trial, accused of denying the gods and corrupting the youth with his teachings. He faces the severest possible punishment. The trial is political from the very beginning. Socrates is simply inconvenient to those in power, and he knows full well that he has little chance of acquittal. In his defense, he argues that he has committed no wrongdoing, that the accusations are nothing more than slander and rumors. He concludes with these words: "It is like fighting shadows. You have convinced yourselves that I am guilty." His speech is bold, intelligent, yet also provocative. And the 500 judges make him feel it in a secret vote. 280 ballots for guilt, 220 for acquittal. Yet the great philosopher still has a choice. He may buy his way out of punishment or accept exile, but that is not his way. Instead, he declares, "I have lived for this city, and I deserve reward, not punishment. It would suffice if you granted me an honor paid at the expense of the state for the rest of my life." The result? In a second vote, 340 out of 500 judges choose the sentence of death. Socrates accepts the verdict with absolute composure. He does not despair. Instead, he consoles his grieving students. "I will die, I have lived. Only the gods know which path is better." A month later, he is executed. He takes the cup of hemlock poison and drinks it. Thus ends the life of one of the greatest thinkers in the history of mankind. Socrates was born in 469 BC. His father was a sculptor and his mother a midwife. His father ensured he received a good education under Athenian law at the time. This was his duty. The era into which Socrates was born was a fortunate one. When he was 10 years old, Athens, with the help of Sparta and other Greek city-states, achieved a decisive victory in the long Greco-Persian Wars. This marked the beginning of what we now call the Golden Age of Athens. At that time, Athens was the greatest naval power in the Greek world and led the Athenian Maritime League, which controlled the Aegean region as far as modern-day Istanbul. Even more important, however, was the city's internal life. Athens was at the height of one of the greatest social experiments of its age democracy. The state was governed by elected representatives, citizens could bring charges against officials, and even the poor could take part in public affairs. Public offices were filled either by election or by lottery, and freedom of speech was respected. Athens reached its greatest flourishing under Pericles, who served as strategos, the highest military and political leader, for 14 years. He was removed from office only in 429 BC, when Socrates was 40. Pericles restored Athens to its former glory, rebuilt temples destroyed by Persian invasions, and turned the city into a true center of the Mediterranean world politically, economically, culturally, and intellectually. It was in this environment that the unique philosophical system Socrates, created more than 2,500 years ago, began to take shape. Its cornerstone was the separation of questions about human life and behavior from the influence of the gods. The Greeks recognized hundreds of gods and demigods, and it was widely believed that human fate depended on their favor or anger. Socrates introduced something that may seem obvious to us today, but in his time, it represented a genuine revolution in thought. He began asking questions that sought to explain human actions and natural phenomena without referring to the gods, emphasizing that we ourselves are responsible for how we live. Figuratively speaking, he brought philosophy down from the heavens to the earth. His teaching was based on rational inquiry into every aspect of human existence. The Greeks recognized 5 virtues: justice, temperance, courage, piety, and wisdom. Socrates noticed, however, that everyone interpreted these virtues differently, and he concluded that they could not be separated. What unites them is an awareness of the human good. The struggle between good and evil for the human soul became the center of his thinking. For him, a good life was not a life of wealth, success, or beauty. What mattered most was the human soul. Goodness protects it. Evil harms it, and so he regarded the ability to distinguish good from evil as the most important of all qualities. He criticized, for example, the Athenian practice of selecting jurors by lottery from among ordinary citizens who would serve only for a single day. He asked, what if a juror with no experience or education cannot distinguish truth from error and condemns an innocent person? Does he not, above all, harm himself, his own soul? No one before him had posed such moral questions, and for this reason, Socrates is regarded today as the founder of ethics. His way of life was as extraordinary as his ideas. Wealth, power, and pleasure meant little to him. In Athens, he was one of the most curious celebrities who ever lived. A brilliant thinker, charismatic yet critical, and often unbearably provocative. He wore only a simple cloak, walked barefoot, paid little attention to his appearance, and according to contemporary descriptions, was not particularly handsome. In a sense, he embodied the guilty conscience of the entire city. Yet he was not a withdrawn sage, living apart from society. He led an active social life, had a wife named Xanthippe, and 3 sons. It is said that when she once poured a chamber pot over his head, he calmly remarked, "After thunder comes rain." He loved taking part in public discussions and symposia feasts where people debated, competed in wit, and schemed against one another. He himself supposedly never wrote anything, believing that writing constrained thought. Nevertheless, or perhaps for that very reason, we know his teachings well thanks to his students, especially Plato. Socrates also served in the army and took part in several battles during the early stages of the Peloponnesian War, where historians say he behaved bravely. But this war brought a decisive turning point in the history of Athens. After Spartan incursions that devastated the surrounding countryside, Pericles ordered the population to withdraw behind the city walls. In the overcrowded city, an epidemic now believed by historians to have been typhus broke out, killing as much as 1/3 of the inhabitants, including Pericles himself. From that point on, nothing was the same. Democracy weakened. Freedom of speech faded. Because of his views and uncomfortable questions, Socrates became increasingly criticized and ridiculed. His friendship with Alcibiades, who defected to Sparta during the war, also harmed his reputation. All of this eventually led to his trial in 399 BC. In the atmosphere of political purges, he refused to flee, believing it would be unjust toward the city that even if wrongly had condemned him. A month after the verdict, he drank a cup of hemlock. He pulled his cloak over his head and waited for the poison to take effect. His final words were, "Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius." And for 2,500 years, philosophers and historians have wondered whether this was simply his way of leaving the world with his affairs in order, or whether he concealed a deeper message within that final sentence.